This is Gamer Weekly, bringing you the latest of what the video game scene has to offer. On today's episode of Gamer Weekly, I have Andrew Bennison of Prospect Games, and we're going to be talking about their latest game, Unbox. Alright, and welcome to another episode of Gamer Weekly. With me today is Andrew Bennison of Prospect Games. Thank you so much for coming onto the show, Andrew.
No problem, thank you for having me.
So, your guys' latest game that's coming out is a game called Unbox. So, tell me about Unbox.
Well, Unbox is a 3D platformer about the ultimate postal service, self-delivering cardboard boxes. It's a 3D platformer with a big single-player experience where you're going through big worlds, completing challenges, defeating bosses, and then once you've done with that, you can grab your friends and get on the couch for some local multiplayer action where we've got delivery and arena game modes, so it's lots of racing, lots of shooting. And all of it's kind of wrapped up in this sort of classic 90s era vibe and feel. We've taken a lot of inspiration from those types of games.
So what made you guys want to make a game where you played as a box?
Well, it actually came out of a game jam. Like many of these sort of recent weird indie titles, we did an Unreal 4 game jam about almost 2 years ago, and the theme was what's in the box, and so it spilled out from there, where we had to come up with something based around the theme, and we kind of struggled for a few hours, and then Jack, one of our designers, appeared and said, like, hey, I've got this box rolling around and it kind of unpackages out of itself. This is weird. And then 3 days later, we had this wacky split-screen multiplayer racing game. And we were thinking, like, wow, this is fun, and people online were enjoying it. And we kind of felt like, hey, this is like a kind of a nice homage to that 90s period where we were playing these sorts of local multiplayer games growing up. So we should turn this into something more. And we basically spent a year and a half doing that, and it's massively evolved since that original concept. But at its core, it's still boxes rolling around doing weird physicsy things.
So is there a story to Unbox?
Yes, absolutely. So in the single play, you take the role of Newbie, who is a recently created cardboard box by the company GPS, which is Global Postal Services, and they basically invented these self-delivering boxes to try save their company from financial ruin. And they're basically testing these products out, and you, as the latest created box, you're there to basically prove that the product works. And so you've got to roll through and complete challenges and do all these things to basically prove that GPS is ready to roll this technology out to the world, but also save them from a much larger threat, which you'll discover as you play the game.
And so it's not just platforming, but you said that there's also, we talked about this before we started recording, you said there was some influence of like Mario Kart and GoldenEye as well. How exactly does that come into play in Unbox?
That's really heavily influenced the local multiplayer side of things. So, for example, and this is shared in both single and multiplayer, you can roll into these blue weapon boxes. You'll be given a random weapon, and that handles like Mario Kart, where if you just look towards an enemy, it will automatically lock on. You click A, and it'll fire a homing rocket and attach to them. And so that plays a much bigger part in the local multiplayer side of things.
So do you guys plan on maybe down the line doing a online multiplayer, or are you just focusing strictly on local multiplayer?
Well, it's one of these things that's probably, I'd say it's been the most requested feature so far, and it's absolutely something that we've looked into in the past and would love to do in the future. And it's really come down to having to kind of pick our battles. You know, as an indie studio, we're low on resources. We've got this high-level concept, and if that works and people really do enjoy playing Unbox in the single player and playing it on the couch with their friends, then I think the next step is logically to at least look into, well, could we bring this to the online sphere? But we've got to make sure that the core concept works first.
Right, because I feel like a lot of games, especially some of the more recent indie games that have been released, I don't want to point fingers, maybe like No Man's Sky, that might just first comes into mind here, where if you end up promising too much, people will expect even more from you. So is it kind of just like you don't want to hit a brick wall and get stuck with like, well, we strung ourselves up like out too far and everyone hates it now.
Yeah, and it's the big problem I think that indies in particular face, because we are kind of by definition inexperienced. Most indie developers are when you hear about them, they're working on their first, maybe second product. And it's probably a case of it with things like No Man's Sky that all of those things existed, that they said existed in the game at some point, or they were being built. What's unfortunate is that oftentimes during development, especially when you're a small studio, is if you're low on resources, there comes a point where you've got to put some stuff on the cutting room floor. You've got to act something. And if you've already talked about that and enthusiastically talked about it with the public because it did exist and you were able to show it, and now you've pulled it, yeah, it's as upsetting for the developer as it is for the consumer. The issue is if you don't tell the consumer you're cutting that content before launch, you're going to find yourself in a really bad situation. And for us, we've always gone above and beyond sort of the expectation of what a studio of our size should make. We've really packed Unbox with a lot of content, but we've tried to not tell everybody everything that's in the game, so that there's some surprises there, and that we're not also kind of like overblowing expectations of what it's going to be, despite it actually being a pretty sizable game. And yeah, so then when it comes to saying stuff like, oh, should we do online or should we not? I mean, we really wanted to when we started this, but if just looking ahead, we realized, well, we've got single player, we've got the local multiplayer. Within those two massive sections of the game, there's all these subsystems that we've got to build and maintain to then have that all work online, which brings with it a whole host of various issues and unique challenges. It was just too much for us. And I think, again, that's a problem that a lot of indies have, is it's an ignorance of how difficult this is, because it's easy to make a game. It's really hard to finish a game. Like, anybody now can get Unity or Unreal or Game Maker, and with a couple of free tutorials put something together that's interesting and weird and wacky and unique. Finishing that is a whole nother story. And so even if it looks easy to make, a single player, and then it looks easy to make, oh, we'll just attach online multiplayer, and oh, we'll integrate this and say we can do that. Yeah, it's all well and good building those things initially, finishing it, completely different challenge, and I think that's where most of us trip up.
So were there any things in Unbox that you guys had to cut besides the multiplayer?
Well, yeah, so we never had online multiplayer. It was more of a sort of pipe dream of like, oh, it'd be really cool if we could do this stuff online. We did at points experiment with sort of soft online. So in the same way that things like Trials HD has ghosts, we experimented with that kind of stuff. And again, we got that actually working. We had a ghost system in the game. The problem then was, well, how do we share this information? Where is it hosted? If we release on future platforms, like the consoles, they have their own terms of service and what you can send and what you can't send. And we didn't know any of that stuff, so we basically just had to axe that right off the bat. And there's been a ton of things in Unbox where we've prototyped stuff and immediately gone, well, it's cool, it would make the game better, but do we know all of the pitfalls here? The unknown knowns, or whatever the term is. Like, do we know all of that stuff to be able to finish this? And when we didn't, we went, right, well, we've just got to axe it, even if it's good. And certainly there's been reductions in content in certain areas of the game just to get the whole thing finished, because, again, that's another problem that we face, is that it's easy to create levels and challenges and all this kind of stuff, but if you want that all to be extremely fun, you need to focus on the stuff that really matters. And for us, yeah, that meant shaving down content here and there, but it was to make the content that already existed far better. And I think it's basically turned Unbox from what could have been a big mediocre experience into a sizable, really good experience.
Because I feel like with a lot of games, especially like open world games, where that seems to just be like the hot item is like, you need to make the game like this giant world that people can explore. And it's like, well, that's cool, but what if there's not anything to do in the world, or like you're doing stuff but it's so mundane, kind of like a lot of games that have like fetch quests, like, oh, you got to go to here and pick up this and then come back here, or kill 6 Balrogs or whatever. And it's like, how do you make it so where like you can make an open world interesting?
Yeah, it's a real challenge. And again, we didn't actually set out to do anything like that with Unbox. It just sort of evolved into that. So yeah, we realized, like, while we've got these very large landscapes, we don't want to be we don't want to have them be empty. So we tried to design the world so that they're big, but there's not big sections where there's nothing to do. And we don't want people just retreading old ground like constantly. So we build it so that if you want to do the core game and the core challenges, we've made it real easy to find what those are. And everything else that's additional, like the gold tape, which is basically our equivalent to like gold coins in Mario. And we have zippies, which are the cardboard boxes. We have those trapped in cages. And that's kind of like in Rayman, the little things that you can save in that. We've tried to make those like spaced around enough that everywhere has a thing going on in it. And we also give little audio and visual clues as well, so that it's not just, as you say, like find 6 things and they could be anywhere and you've just got to constantly be traipsing around. Like, we've tried to assist the player and, okay, there's some stuff out here, we'll kind of help you to find it. You've also got to search for it, and it's not going to be too difficult to find. But at the same time, it's not going to be a cakewalk.
And so do you get like unlocks and stuff too when you collect all of this stuff?
Yeah, so every time you complete a challenge or collect all the gold tape on a map, you'll get a cosmetic item, and so you can go to the shop, you can dress your cardboard box up. So you start off as just a bland beige cardboard box, and you can unlock all the other character skins, hats, accessories, physics clothing. So if you want to dress your box up in a business suit with scuba gear and a top hat, you can do that, and we have color swaps for every item as well. So I think we have something like 40,000 plus permutations of cosmetics you can wear, which is pretty. I think we've got the most customizable cardboard boxes in any video game ever, so that can be at least our one claim to fame.
So are you guys going to eventually have it to where there's boxes that drop and you have to pay $250 to unbox the box?
I don't no plans as of yet. We'll see. We certainly want to provide more content for the game down the line, and that will be to an extent determined by how many people end up getting the game. But we've already got some cool ideas in the works, and it basically comes down to if people really like Unbox and they want more content for it, like we really want to make more stuff.
I mean, that makes sense to me. Yeah, definitely. So the game comes out September 7th.
Yes, on Steam.
On Steam. You guys are maybe possibly doing console, or is that still like we would like to?
Well, we actually, and this ties back into that previous point about overselling stuff. So we did announce that we were developing for PlayStation and PlayStation 4 and Xbox One in February of this year, and we still technically are, but it's basically in terms of like release dates, like we can't really announce anything because we've got to put all of our resources into the Steam launch and see how that does. And I kind of wish we'd held that stuff back a bit, because it put a lot of pressure on us to develop more for the consoles, when really what we should have been focusing on is the PC. And I've seen loads of other indie devs go through this process as well, where the tools we use like Unity and Unreal allow us to develop for multiple platforms. And while that's really cool, it doesn't necessarily mean you should do it, because if bugs start appearing on the PlayStation version but not the PC version, and maybe the Xbox version, the PC version are running great, but the PlayStation 4 isn't. There's all these sorts of things you've got to firefight, and if you've only got a small number of people on your team, each one of those problems prolongs the amount of time before you can even get one version of the game out, say the Steam version. So that's the situation we found ourselves in, where it's like, okay, we've got the game running on Xbox and PlayStation, great, but rather than hold the Steam version back and potentially be losing money and time on getting that out, we should just release a Steam version, see how that goes, and then based on the result of the sales results of that, plan our next steps.
All right, cool. Well, that is Unbox. So definitely check it out. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on to the show. I'll provide a link to the game on the website on gadget.tv. And also, if you have a iTunes compatible device, you can find Gamer Weekly on iTunes, and you can hit subscribe. So if you forget that it came out, don't worry, it'll come up automatically, so you don't even have to think about it. So once again, Andrew, thank you so much for coming onto the show. Check out Unbox. It's a pretty awesome game. And thank you so much for listening to another episode of Gamer Weekly. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for listening to this week's Gamer Weekly. This is Justin Bannister signing off.